So, as an intimacy coach and a therapist who works with couples pretty often, one thing that I see the most, with couples in regards to what they struggle with, are these five top things. Okay, so, and it's interesting, the things that I'm about to discuss, they're not really complicated concepts. Now, are they easy to execute? Not quite. And a big reason for that is because these are things that we're just not taught, like growing up, like even in our relationships with our parents and grandparents, aunts, uncles, what we learn in school, people are not teaching these basic relational skills, interpersonal skills, which I could go on a soapbox all day long about what I feel should be taught in schools, but that's a whole other video for another day. But when I think about some of these things that I'm going to go over today, it's just a reminder about how much we're doing a disservice to our children by not learning these skills and then also applying the skills so that we can be an example, but then also teaching them the skills as well. And so, again, another soapbox, because I could talk about that quite often. And to be honest, a big reason why I got into intimacy coaching was because I wanted to teach people these skills that we just don't get growing up. And so I'll go over a lot of that today. So, five top things, five things that long term couples commonly struggle with. Okay, so number one, we know communication breakdowns, right? Everyone says a relationship requires communication, but a lot of people don't even know what communication is because they just feel that if the words are coming out of their mouths to each other, they're communicating. But communication, there's an art to it, okay? And so when you think about when you speak to someone from a different country or that has a different language as sometimes we may say things got lost in the translation or because we're interpreting things differently, it's going to be a little bit more challenging for us to communicate, and there lies the barrier. Well, it's the same thing in your relationships. A lot of times things get lost in the translation because we're really not understanding the language that each other speaks. When it comes to that, couples can kind of fall into this like pattern of like poor listening, assumptions, and then avoidance. And so, because of that, we miss out on these opportunities to really learn one another because we're really not understanding what it looks like to actively listen and what it looks like to approach a situation and actually be direct and confront a situation because we're trying to avoid it. This is all a part of communication. And these are the types of things that you really don't learn. It's not really taught to you unless you specifically go to school for something very clearly stated, like this is the curriculum, this is what we're going to be talking about when it comes to communication. No one knows that stuff. No one. So a lot of us are just learning on the job, which can significantly impact how we hear one another, how we interpret different things. And so communication breakdowns is number one. It's one of the biggest things. And it's a lot of times, too, there's a lot of unspoken needs and desires and expectations that we feel like aren't being met. And so a lot of times what happens when, we don't feel like our needs are being met, either we keep yelling at someone or talking at them, or we just seclude and avoid altogether. Again, breakdown in communication, right? And then this is where the emotional disconnect starts to build. So when all of those things are crumbling, again, when we talk about not understanding how to really actively listen, we're avoiding certain topics for fear of how our partners are going to react or respond. We have these unspoken needs and expectations that maybe sometimes we haven't even explored ourselves as to why this is such an important need so that we can effectively communicate it to our partners. This is where, intimacy, emotional intimacy just literally plummets right in front of your eyes. So, communication breakdowns is one of the biggest things that I see a lot of times when I'm helping couples to try to reconnect intimately. Number two, sexual and physical changes. Okay, so what that can look like is, a lot of times when you've been in a relationship for quite some time, there are some things that are just going to happen over the course of a relationship. The longer you're with someone, the more you all are going to experience things together. Okay, and that could be, for instance, light bulb, right? Aging. We're all aging. So, and aging comes with its own set of, challenges too that sometimes we're not ready to discuss in a relationship until things happen. We're not talking about these things ahead of time because we just don't know. We don't know how our bodies are going to respond. We don't know how our hormonal changes are going to affect our relationships. We don't know if something happens where someone gets hurt or gets sick. We don't know these things until they come up. But again, if you are actively working on your effective communication, when things like this hit the fan, it's not to say that it's going to be perfect or that it's going to be easy, but you'll have a little bit more of a substance of how you all communicate to kind of go off on. And so, again, as I'm speaking, a lot of these things are kind of like building blocks. And I always tell my clients this as well. We start off at a certain pace in the counseling session or the coaching session. And then what we do is we progress from there. So again, communication is huge, you know? And so if we do not really understand what that communication looks like and how to actually execute it, then when we run into issues such as like the sexual, intimacy, the physical intimacy overall, then we don't even know where to start. We don't even know how to address some of these issues. A lot of times, too, when it comes to sex, and I've talked about this in previous videos, as far as expressing your desires, which you can, but then also you have to be aware of how you're expressing those desires to your partner and how they're receiving it. Because if they're receiving it in a way that makes them feel like that they are not good enough, or that they're not measuring up to your standards, or that they feel like they're being pressured, then what ends up happening is they can also kind of shut down. But then at the same time, too, we also have to recognize that whether we're in a relationship, we're married, whatever the case may be, um, physical intimacy, no one owes you that. And that sometimes is a hard pill to swallow because we've been so accustomed to, well, if we're in a relationship, that's what you should just naturally be giving me. But it doesn't always work that way. And so a lot of times we have to create spaces, safe spaces, so that each other can feel that this is consensual. Consent. Like, I am consenting to this. Because when we consent to things, we are enjoying the experience a lot more. And so you want to create that. But a lot of times, a lot of couples don't know how to do that. They don't even know where to start. A lot of couples just really don't know how to express to their partners that you're safe with me and that you can decide what you want to do at your own pace. But at the same time, we should still be cultivating that emotional intimacy so that we can feel safe enough to open up in that way. And so, a lot of times, what happens is when we're not connected in that space, then intimacy starts to feel more so like a task or a chore as opposed to connection. Number three, unresolved conflict or resentment. And so, again, I see this so often, like when I'm talking with people, and especially when I meet them initially, we're building a relationship, we're building rapport. And, I hear both people talking about different things that's going on, and I'm listening to them, and I'm just like, I'm trying to understand what's the disconnect. Like, what are you all having challenges with? And a lot of times it may not necessarily come out until after a couple of sessions or so when we've been doing a little bit more of like a deep dive. And I find out that there's some unresolved conflict and also some resentment in the relationship. And so if you're carrying that, if you don't know how to effectively, deal with conflict and resolve conflict, then that issue that you've been having is going to be looming, over your head, or it's going to be buried inside, and so it's going to make it very challenging for you to connect with your partner because you're holding resentment. And so many couples are holding resentment. And I've made another video on that too. It's like when there's resentment in a relationship, it blocks intimacy like literally all the time. It's very challenging to get through and connect with your partner when you feel like they have done you wrong, or that they owe you something, or that they have not acknowledged maybe some of the hurt, that they've caused you. And so that's a big one too that I see. And so a lot of times, if we're not resolving that conflict effectively, and we're not dealing with like some of the resentment that we've been holding sometimes for years, and some couples for decades, and this causes a breakdown in a relationship. And so one thing that I do a lot of times with my clients is we work on conflict resolution. We work on it very extensively, sometimes like 3-4 sessions in a row, because so many people have not been taught how do I deal with this conflict? It keeps coming up over and over again. I keep banging my head up against the wall and I'm wondering why this is not working. Like I keep talking to them about my concerns and they still keep ignoring it or they not acknowledging it. Whatever it is that you're perceiving is happening, but you're not able to resolve this situation. Sometimes you have to look at yourself. Sometimes the reason you're not resolving the issue too is because you're not recognizing the growth that your partner has made and the strides that they've made. And so a lot of times our partners also want to be acknowledged too in that way. Like, okay, I know I'm not perfect. I know I'm not doing everything that you would like me to do, but who does? Like, who actually does something for someone 100% of the time? And if we're honest with ourselves, we're really honest, we know that we're not perfect as well. And so a lot of times when we're not acknowledging our partner's efforts, um, and what they're attempting to accomplish, with you, then we can continuously harbor, that resentment. So that's definitely something I see as well. Number four, over time, I just see a lot of people drifting apart and there's a lot of emotional distance. And again, this stuff does not happen overnight. So when I talk about building blocks, all of those things that I addressed just before number four, this is how we get to this point. So lack of communication, effective communication, unspoken, um, issues with our needs and desires being met, whether sexually or emotionally. We're not resolving conflict. We're not dealing with the resentment that we're harboring. And so then what happens is we start to naturally drift away, from each other. And sometimes the natural drifting can actually happen when there isn't really necessarily a conflict, or resentment. Sometimes it's just the natural ebbs and flows of life. So life transitions, like having children, being pulled in different directions, whether it's with your job or you went back to school, or you have some, older family members or sick family members that you're taking care of. What happens is the relationship becomes more logistic than emotional. And so when you get into that mindset, think about this, right? We think about the way our brains are wired. If we're more so operating in this logistical side, like just getting things done, very task oriented, we don't leave room for curiosity, exploration, intuitiveness, creativity, flexibility. And so those are things that's really needed to really promote a strong emotional relationship with your partner. So sometimes it's just the natural things in life, which is why it's so important to cultivate these spaces between each other where you're constantly working on your emotional intimacy, because we know life sometimes can just get in the way. And so you don't want to take away from that. And so when we hear those things like date nights, it may sound cliche, but at the same time, these are things that can kind of help continue to maintain that emotional intimacy. So drifting apart and emotional distance is something that I see very, very often. And then that's when you get to a point where you feel like roommates as opposed to romantic partners. And then number five, the last thing I see a lot of times is just mismatch in growth and your overall value system. And so a lot of times when I'm working with couples, when they come to me, the first thing is we go right into core values. I want to know your core values, whether you've been together 2 years or 20 years or 40 years or beyond. I want to know at this present moment, what are your core values? What are you looking to achieve? Whether it's individually or as a couple. And we need to see, first of all, do those things actually align with each other? Even if they don't match completely, we need to see if there's alignment, if there's a complement to one another. Because if it's not, that is going to be a challenge over time. If I have very strong views about something or I prioritize something and you don't, or you don't feel the need to prioritize it and you could care less, what I'm doing, or you may feel like, I don't like what you're doing, so I'm going to disrespect what you're doing. So then again, now our values are just totally out of whack. And over time, that could definitely diminish the emotional and physical intimacy of a couple as well. And so you got to think about this. As human beings, we're always evolving, always evolving. I don't care how consistent you feel like you've been over the last few years or even decades, and you're like, no, I've never changed. Well, in all honesty, we're all changing. We can't help it because we're all getting older every single day. And what comes with that is evolution. So we're always evolving. Our mindsets might shift, from time to time. You may have a partner who shifts a little bit more often than the other. That can cause some challenges. One partner may be seeking a certain level of growth, even like within themselves individually, and the other partner could be resisting that change, whether it's in themselves or in their partners. That can also cause, couples to have some challenges in a long-term relationship. And a lot of times when we're misaligned, we can feel like we're on two different pages, about life, about our future, just about anything. And these are some of the things that I see pretty often, when it comes to our relationships, like long term relationships. And I'll go over that again, like our communication breakdowns, sexual and physical intimacy changes, unresolved conflict or resentment, drifting apart or emotional distance, and also mismatch in growth and in values. And so just take some time to kind of think about your long term relationship, the person you're with, and just think about some of the challenges you all are having. Do they fit in one of those categories? And more than likely it does. And so I definitely want you to take some time and really just sit with that, reflect on it, and schedule some time with your partner and just be like, these are some things that I'm noticing within myself. And start with yourself. Try your best not to put it all on your partner, but start with yourself and say, you know what, I've noticed this about me. I noticed these are the areas that I'm changing in. I've noticed the areas that I'm not as easy to change in or easy to, embrace growth or embrace your perspective. But I want to. I want to learn. And I would hope that you would like to do the same with me. So definitely let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I love to hear, what you all think about that, what you're seeing, whether it's in your relationship or something that you've observed. And do you observe one or more of these five things as being challenges in long-term relationships? And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my channel for more intimacy tips and different things that you can apply in your relationship or individually.